Hi stamping friends, Melissa Kerman here with Melissa's Crafting Treehouse. I am a Stampin' Up! Demonstrator and I sell all the products that I show on my website. And today's project features the Farmhouse Christmas Stamp Set and the coordinating Farmhouse Framelits. These are in the holiday catalog, which is retiring as of January 2nd. So if you like any of these products, now is the time to get them. So this project was one of the projects that we did at my team event actually a couple of months ago, and it looks really simple on the surface of it, but it actually has a lot of detail to it, so I'm going to cover all of those details in this video. So what I started with is stamping the house image twice, once on Whisper White cardstock and the other on Cherry Cobbler cardstock. Now I stamped my cherry cobbler house off camera, and then I went on to do all of my die cutting, and there are several pieces to die cut. So I started here with my cherry cobbler house and the fence in white, and then also the cherry cobbler bows. Now I'm only going to use 2 of these bows, but as you can see, the die actually cuts out 6 bows, so you can use them for some other purpose or another project. So next I'm going to come in and do my die cutting of my white house and the sort of snowy ground, what's going to look like snowy ground in the end. And this is a great use for leftover scraps of white cardstock. I have a ton of little scraps. Now I've sized that piece of white so that it's the same width as the focal piece. After I've die cut all my pieces, I'm going to use my die brush to poke out the little pieces from the fence. The fence is actually, I think, my favorite die in this whole set. It's just so cute. You can see me doing that here now. And the fence actually comes out of the die really easily. As you can see, I didn't even have to poke it out with my paper piercing tool. And now I have all of my pieces to assemble my focal piece. And I'm going to start with using my scissors to cut out the shapes from the cherry cobbler house that I need to superimpose over the top of the white house. Now I experimented with a couple of different ways to color in the house, including actually using aqua painters and blender pens. But in the end, I did end up using some elements that were cut out and some elements that were colored in. So I'm cutting out the roof of the top of the house, and then the door, and then last I'll cut out that little secondary roof that's over the front porch. Now after I have all these pieces cut out, the next thing I played with was coloring in the shutters of the house. I knew I didn't want to have to cut them out because it seemed really hard and they're tiny itty bitty. So I played around with using my aqua painter for applying color, and then I also messed around with using a blender pen as an alternative. And I was looking at the depth of color to decide which I liked better and which one gave me more control. And in the end, I decided to use the blender pen with some ink in the roof of my cherry cobbler ink pad to apply that color. So now I'm just going to go over each of the shutters and color in the rest of those elements. So now I'm finishing coloring in the shutters, and you'll notice I haven't actually attached the roof pieces or the door yet, and underneath the roof pieces you're going to see that I actually colored in those elements as an alternative way to do this design. But in the end I liked the darker elements as a contrast with the coloring in of the shutters. The next thing I'm going to do is stamp the trees in behind the house, so I'm just laying out my pieces and using a pencil to mark off where the house will be so that I can tell where I want the trees in behind. And I'll of course erase those pencil marks afterwards. And I'm going to stamp a couple of times both first and second ink of the tree on either side of the house, doing some higher and some lower, just based upon the look that I'm going for. So for that first tree, I did that one stamped off, and then you can see I brought the fence in to kind of get an idea of my positioning again, and I kept going back and forth like that just to make sure I was framing the house in the way that I wanted with the trees. And now those last two, of course, I did full ink and bringing in the fence again and the house just to make sure I've got enough of the tree images in behind. And I've decided that I wanted to do a stamped off image off to the left just to balance out the left and the right a little bit more. The next thing I'm going to work on is positioning the fence, and I realized when I was doing this that the fence posts weren't positioned exactly where they needed to, so I had to sort of play around with it and figure it out. I cut out some in the center, but I really didn't need to cut it out in the center. What I needed to do was cut it on the right and the left, and once I figured out the spacing, I realized I needed about 4 of the smaller, shorter fence posts on the left and on the right to get the positioning of the fence posts in the right place so that they would frame the house, and I'd have a spot to put the little itty bitty bows. So as you can see, I'm going to line up the fence to the right in just the right spot and snip it off, and then I'm going to do the same thing on the left side. Then I'll be using my fine tip glue pen to apply adhesive to the back side of the fence, and I'll just go ahead and attach it to the front of my focal piece. So once the fence pieces are attached, you can go ahead and attach the ground piece that you cut off. You want to make sure that it's not too tall, so you want to make sure that the fence shows in behind the ground. And I just attached that piece with regular snail adhesive. And I then took my Wink of Stella brush and I colored all over that piece of white ground, if you will, to make it look sparkly and snowy. Next, I'm going to attach my house to my focal piece using Stampin' Dimensionals. Now to finish off my focal piece, I'm going to use glue dots to attach the cherry cobbler pieces that I cut out earlier, the 2 roofs and the little door. And then I'll also use a rolled up glue dot to attach the 2 little bows to my fence posts. So I'm going to be bringing in my paper piercing tool and my U-pick tool, which will both come in handy when I'm working with these really tiny little pieces, particularly those bows. So you'll see me in just a second. I'm going to use my paper piercing tool to actually roll up a glue dot so that it's small enough to fit in behind that the little itty bitty bow. So there I am rolling it up, and then I'm going to use my U-pick tool to place it onto the glue dot. The U-pick tool has multiple tools on this one little tool, including a little spatula, and it has a paper piercing tool as well. And it's got that putty on the tip, which makes it just a little bit sticky for picking little itty bitty pieces up. So now I'm using my paper piercing tool to pick those bows up from off of the roll of glue dots and place them on the fence posts. So now most of what's left is the assembly of this card. I do need to stamp the sentiment, so that'll come shortly. So I just attached the gray granite piece to the cherry cobbler card base, and now I'm taking a piece of my Festive Farmhouse Designer Series paper and attaching that to the front. And before I attach this cherry cobbler piece, I'm going to actually do my stamping. So I'm placing it out just to gauge my spacing a little bit. You can see I didn't press it down. And then I'm going to take my sentiment from the set and figure out the positioning for stamping it just below the cherry cobbler piece right there. So all I really have left is the final assembly, and while I do that, I'd like to remind you that the holiday catalog is retiring as of January 2nd, and this Festive Farmhouse stamp set is one of the items that is retiring. So you may want to jump over to my blog and check out all the products that I used for this particular project. There are links to my online store and lots of other details, including project dimensions. And there's also lots of additional helpful links in the video description below as well. So thanks for spending some time with me today, and I hope you enjoyed this video, and will come back and visit me again sometime soon. And don't forget to like and share and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you enjoyed what you saw today. Have a great day and happy crafting!